When you consider historical travel and then you look at the mobility needs that an illness like fibromyalgia can place on you, what are the first things you think of? Today's episode is looking at these questions. It's about our trial run dealing with a camper van, various types of tourist attractions within the county of York. This episode also covers some of the things that did and did not work, and some of the things that you can learn from our experiences to maybe implement in your own forms of accessible travel. First of all, why York? Why did we choose that city to be our first major outing in the van, to the point where we planned for 21 days? Well, it was a test run. Over time that we've been together, we've gone to different places. Like we went to Bath, we went to the medieval fair twice. We've gone to other simple day trips. But we wanted to go to some place that was further away. And York has certain attractions that would appeal to both of us. So we chose that as our first major trip. We hoped to visit the Air Museum, the Yorvik Centre. But beyond that, we didn't have any real set plans because we didn't know all of the attractions there. And so what we did is we planned our trip in a way that fit our accessibility needs. We actually did it in 2 stages. We did a halfway point where we stayed 2 nights to give us a day between travel to rest and recover for the next trip. And in that time, we were able to meet with my partner's son. And he told me about a place that instantly got my attention, and that was the Shambles. Luckily, it was in an area we were already planning to visit. When we got to the next campsite, we found that the camp area had brochures, and we went through and started looking at all the brochures. And we planned to go to about 3 or 4 places over the course of our trip. We only made it to 2, but one of them covered several different things. Luckily, the Shambles was in that area. During our research for this trip, we discovered ShopMobility, a nationwide network of local services that hire wheelchairs and mobility scooters of various sizes. The York service is run locally, and we booked 2 scooters from its city center location for our day in York. But what we didn't realize at the time, and that did turn out to be a major problem, was that this scooter shop was up on one of the floors of a parking structure. They had parking right by where they were at. So with mobility needs, you could just pull in and you'd be right at the store. However, we were in a camper van, and it was not tall enough for us. So we dropped me off at the beginning of one of the areas so I could walk to it. And then he went searching for a parking spot that was close enough that he could get to the store. Basically, it took us about 2 hours to actually get to the point where we were able to actually go explore. So we were limited on time because the shop opened at 10 and closed at 4. And I had to walk quite a distance. And so by the time I got to the shop, I was hurting pretty bad. I ended up having to take some of my medication in a way that time it took for him to find a parking spot, because it gave me a chance to calm down and let the medication actually start dealing with some of the pain. But one of the things that happened while I was there is someone else had come in who had pre-booked a scooter, only she had pre-booked one of the smaller ones. And that's when I found out they actually will pre-book for a longer journey some of the smaller scooters. So this person was renting it for a week. She had booked one of the smaller foldable mobility scooters. However, there was an error, and so she had to go with a larger class 2 mobility scooter. This may be something that you don't need, but for those that do, it's good to know that there's access there. And I am positive that there are going to be places in the US that also has these types of things. Because I know I have rented going to events. I've been to medieval fairs. I've been to other types of places with their events that do rent out mobility scooters. Maybe not at the same type of price ranges they do here, because here, this particular mobility scooter was only £15 for a day. And it is more expensive at some of the venues in the States. But these types of stores do give people with mobility needs like me more access to different types of venues and different types of experiences. In the city center, there was a lot of monuments. There was one that is Roman in origin. They had different topiaries, the animal-shaped plants where they kept. And it was actually a very beautiful little memorial center. This was surrounding where the Roman statue was. When you consider it was a historical section, when it comes to mobility, you've got to consider different terrains. This was mostly flat, so that is a good thing. But it did require a lot of shifting of different types of surfaces. Some of it was sidewalk, some was cobblestone, some was pavement, some was grass, depending on what areas you were going into. Plus also, depending on what size your mobility scooter. One of the exterior areas that I wanted to visit was the Shambles. I had found out about it when we spent having a meal with his son and his partner. And when they described the Shambles, it was very Harry Potter-esque. Even though I'm older, I was very much into Harry Potter. But it's just a really neat little thing, and I heard about it, and I was kind of excited to see it. It's supposed to be like a riff on Diagon Alley. And I was kind of disappointed at it. But then again, I got to remember, this is a historical area. This is not a Universal Studios Diagon Alley. So it was not that Harry Potter. But it was very interesting. It actually was more like Hogsmeade. But it had a lot of things like Harry Potter memorabilia. It had stores that catered to candles, stores that catered to soaps. It had a little marketplace. The things I picked up while we were there, I bought 4 different versions of this, and I'm planning on using them on my backdrop, and I'm going to be working with some of the different ones I got, because I got 4. And I will actually probably build something that will show the 4 different ones. And I'm going to still keep my Big Ben, but I'm going to start rationing it out and try and add a little bit of variety to my backdrop. That's one of the things. I got another thing that was another bracelet that was better than the one I was wearing. And at least the clasp was. And we saw some other things that I did take. I think I took some videos, some pictures of, because they were really neat little carvings and things like that. And it was just little things. It was fun. It was difficult in some ways because the cobblestones, which actually surprisingly enough, because we did get one of the larger scooters, I did not have as much jolting. It was a full level 4 roadworthy. And so because of that, it had better suspension, which probably made it a lot easier for me. Another thing that we did was there was right next to the Shambles, there was a pottery store. And we were able to buy a bowl that was more conducive to putting water in, that we and the pets were more likely to knock over, which was actually the third attempt of finding something like that. And this one actually worked. It was pretty busy, the Shambles as well as the Yorvik Centre in general. There was a lot of people there, probably because it was a nice day. It was in the middle of June, and it is a tourist area. Would we like to visit in less busy time frame? Yes, we would. I did get to go through the Shambles, and it did not spend much time on the sidewalk. I did go down the cobblestone mostly because it was the sidewalks were a little narrow. And that is something to consider. I did have to park outside stores to be able to go into them because many of them had at least 1 or 2 steps, or they were just narrow. But that's a historical building. The other major area that we visited in Yorvik Centre was the Yorvik Centre. We had seen a brochure that we found from the camp store. And it was it showed up in several of the brochures we had. And one of the things we saw was it, as well as 2 others, had offered a deal where you could visit all 3 if you bought a specific ticket, which reduced the cost of all 3. We considered it, but I went to the websites and 2 of them were not accessible. And unfortunately, that is the case with a lot of historical things. There was a manor house we wanted to visit, but we couldn't visit because of the same reason. It's an old building, and there's only so much they can do without changing physical structure. And that's just how it is. However, the Yorvik Centre was really quite neat. We only visited it, so we only got the single ticket. One of the things when I went on their website was really quite interesting was how they discussed how their staff was disability trained. To be aware, it's how they took what was still an archaeological dig and turned it into a tourist attraction that could allow for a single wheelchair. That meant that my partner had to walk, but I was able to use a wheelchair. It did have an elevator because it went down a level so that you could see over where the archaeological dig was. And it was of an old Viking village. Had all kinds of displays. I took way too many pictures. I even took a video of us going through the basic ride, which was very Pirates of the Caribbean-esque, or where you go through and they show you a bunch of scenes with a lot of standing, and they go through a description where you ride through it. I had talked with the guy who was guiding us because they had had someone specifically separate to make sure we could get to where everything was. And I had told him that I was taking video. While I was on the ride, the guide went to get the accessibility planning binder used by the staff. He showed it to me afterwards and allowed me to take this photograph. For me, it showed that their approach to accessibility was not improvised. They had a clear process to help the staff understand and respond to individual mobility and medical needs. They had us park our scooters in a safe area because it was right in front of the desk of the entrance. And we were able to travel down the elevator, and I used the wheelchair. I had plenty of places to sit. The displays were also really quite neat. But just watching the detail that they went into to try and plan around mobility needs. They asked about inhalers. They asked about things like this because they asked about medical conditions just to make sure that they were ready to provide what was needed. Some may find this to be invasive. I don't. Not because of the fact that, yeah, it's medical information. Why should you give it out? that's a very valid argument. But I also look at it from a health perspective. If you all of a sudden have an asthma attack and you don't have your inhaler, one time when I was in the States, I ended up having to walk too far, and I had an asthma attack when I was going into the medical center. And one of the security guards had to go back out to my car and get my inhaler because I realized too late that it wasn't in my bag. Those kinds of situations kind of open my eyes to the fact you've got to be willing to actually say sometimes that these issues need to be able to be responded to. As it was, I still went inside that medical center and I ended up getting a full-on treatment because that's how bad the asthma attack was, because I got hit by somebody smoking. For me, smoking is almost an instant asthma attack. And don't get me started on what pepper spray does. That's an emergency room. And yes, I have experienced that once. And I only got the downwind shift of somebody who had gotten sprayed. I wasn't even anywhere near him, but I got hit with just enough that it literally dropped me to my knees with an asthma attack that had to take me to the ER. And just knowing that sometimes being willing to advocate for your disability actually helps them help you. It's not meant to be invasive. What it's meant to be is actually cater to your medical needs. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but this is something I think that is very important for people to understand. The other place that we really visited was something that both were interested in, the Air Museum. It was actually built on an old RAF base, and there were all kinds of historical planes there, ranging from World War I up to, there was one wooden one that they were in the process of restoring, and they actually had a whole aircraft area that was designed just for restoration of planes, which was actually quite neat to look at. It was extremely accessible. There were one or two areas that I had to get off, or I didn't go on at all, because they did have the watchtower, which had stairs, of course, because it's an aircraft base. So I couldn't go upstairs, but I did go inside, and they had they had things that they were selling, and I will take a picture of some of those. And I picked up two things. They were mostly for donations to help finish restoring the watchtower. There was a lot of planes, some really neat ones, like one that had foldable wings, and it actually had a dual prop. Obviously an aircraft carrier plane. And it was really quite interesting because I had never seen an aircraft that actually had dual props. And other ones were World War I era, World War II, and there was just so many neat planes. There was also a few displays that were in the other buildings that were on the site. Some of the planes you could actually get onto, which of course, obviously I couldn't. So that was another inaccessible area, but for most average day people, it'd be really neat. One of the really neat things, though, I got to see is they had displays about those who deal with air balloons. And there was also a display on communications equipment. As someone who is ex-military communications, it was really neat to be able to see the difference between my era of communications equipment and communications equipment that was in World War II. I loved seeing it. Something that was also very cool was they had a women's garden. Basically, it was a memorial to how women served during World War II. And I don't think that gets enough recognition about how much women actually do apply. I mean, we fought so hard for recognition, and we still fight for it. being a woman in the military is difficult because, after all, it is a patriarchal system. And seeing a World War II memorial to the women who dealt with helping with the war effort was just cool. Overall, our trip to York was a mixed bag, in large part due to weather. We weren't able to do as much as we wanted. It was very much a good experience in trying to figure out how best to deal with our mobility needs. And it gave us more things to look at. We do plan another one trip back. We plan on doing most of our long trips during the spring and fall. Neither one of us handled the heat. Would we recommend going? Oh, yes, definitely. I would recommend that people do more exploration, look more into the attractions in the area. When we went to the Area Museum, it had way more pamphlets that we could have possibly visited, but we didn't know about, so we didn't find out about them until close to the end. And so we could have planned better. Honestly, really, there was not a lot of real difficult areas except for the ones that were just plain non-accessible. And that's, well, par for the course for a historical area. York gave us plenty to think about. It gave us a really good test of what it was like to be in a historical area, but what it really tested was the vehicle. It was testing us when dealing with having a dog, 2 cats in a very small space. And next week, I'm going to go through a lot of the issues that we found with the van. I am also going to go through all of the adaptations that I did do, how they worked, and how they didn't. No matter how you look at it, we have to do trial runs with all of the adaptability we deal with. Simply because the fact is our disability puts limitations on us, and we have to work around them. That's just how life is. I hope you enjoyed visiting York with us, and I'm really curious as to what you would have enjoyed doing if you had gone to York yourself. I would love to know if you found the information that was given in this video helpful. So if that helps you, feel free to stick around. I know how isolating fibromyalgia can feel, so I have started a Discord where my hope is that people can come, talk, share experiences, and just feel less alone. I'll leave a link to that below, and if you'd rather reach out privately, I am including my email as well. These videos are written from my own personal experiences. They are not meant as a medical diagnosis. They're not meant as medical advice. I'm just trying to share ways that I've learned to deal with the illness from over 3 decades of experience.